Did we enable the Q&A stuff?
I'll do it right now.
Look at
Normally I
my
do it
hero.
before, but I forgot.
You're my hero, man, because whenever you're not here, me and Pinky are like, Eric always does this. How do we do this again?
Yeah.
How do we enable chat? Oh no.
It's like the first 5 minutes of everyone that's just me and Oscar, just us fumbling around looking for options.
Yeah.
Where's that at again?
I feel like
The
Joe
last
Dirt.
few times we've done it, it's like, hey, did we do it? I'm like, I already did it, but this time
Yeah.
I was not on the ball. Sorry about that. But hey, happy Friday indeed in chat.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
The happiest of Fridays.
Oh, I just accidentally turned closed cap. I was clicking buttons. Closed captioning's on. I don't know.
Sweet.
Maybe that's useful for somebody.
Oh,
All
it's funny,
right,
like
guys.
weird segue. I mean, just as a thought here. Do you guys turn them on movies now?
That's a really good segue.
So,
I don't. I've been hearing about more people turning them on. The only time like I'll ever turn, if I'm watching something that's like an English film, I can't process the words fast enough when the accents are really thick. Like even like Ted Lasso, like a lot of the characters on Ted Lasso have a hard time keeping up. So I will turn it on in those situations, but that's really it for me. But I'm hearing like more and more people are using subtitles now.
yeah, I mean, I do have some hearing loss. I mean, so it's part of it, but also, I mean, I've been doing it for
Mhm.
years, and didn't even realize I was doing it. Like, kind of just started like, let me turn it on to go hear that section again, and then I just started leaving it on. But I was reading an article a while back about how it's really prominent now that people just turn on subtitles, even if they don't, if they're not hearing impaired, um, because of the way the sound is compressed or something in streaming, like it doesn't come through very well or something. So,
Mhm.
I
so
have a bit of
those
a
are weird.
theory on it too, that it's just that we as a society, especially like younger, age brackets and stuff, right? Like we have all become a little bit more ADD. Like our minds are a little bit everywhere, you know what I mean? And have a hard time sometimes. And so like sometimes you miss something or you're not fully listening and you can quickly catch up. You know what I mean? I know I use
Yeah.
it for that occasionally, and so maybe I'm just projecting, but that is a theory of mine. Like I feel like some people are maybe using it more because of that. I will say that I use and I have used for years. I keep hearing myself or something. I don't
I
know.
hear you.
Good. I'm hearing feedback. Anyway, I've been using them for years. I have an aunt who is not fully deaf, but like she's very hard of hearing. You know what I mean? Like at this point in life, it was a problem earlier on, and it's gone worse and worse. And so she listens to the TV very loud and with subtitles always. And I grew up around that. Like it felt weird when I was watching something that didn't have subtitles. Like it got so ingrained into me. I was so used to them that I
Mhm.
started doing it like out of habit. I just like always had them on. And I know that like my wife was very much like, what's with all the subtitles all the time? And I was like, oh, well, it's because of my aunt. She's like, oh, yeah, no, that makes sense. And I'm just so used to it. Now she's used to it. We're just used to it. We always have subtitles on. Like,
Yeah.
90% of the time at least.
I noticed too a lot of shorts, like YouTube shorts, TikTok, even just videos I see
Mm.
on Reddit, like people are putting subtitles in, even if you want them or not. So I think more people that are like consuming on those platforms are probably just getting used to reading titles as part of their media consumption. And so they're translating that over to just when they're watching TV or movies. The other thing I really like see a benefit for using subtitles for is like a lot of movies, the way that they're mixed is like the explosions, the action scenes are so loud, and
Mhm.
they'll increase your volume by 20 to 30%. So if I'm watching a movie, I'm constantly sometimes like turning my volume down if it's late at night when they get to these action scenes and then they have dialogue, I'm turning it back up. So you could just watch on a lower volume, enable the subtitles, and problem solve, I guess.
Yeah.
I used to have a TV that did like an adaptive audio compression for that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, where it would not compression is in whatever, but like an audio compressor where it's gonna bring the highs and lows more
Yeah.
toward middle, right? And it was so great for that because you could set a volume and it
Mm-hmm.
would kind of just like sometimes you'd hear it, it'd be kind of weird. Like you'd expect an
Yeah.
explosion to be very loud and it wouldn't quite be as loud as you
Mm-hmm.
expected. But overall, it was a really nice feature. I haven't had one since though. This was like 20 years ago or something. And
Mm-hmm.
I
yeah.
think I think kind of Phillips that did that. I haven't seen it since either. That's been about that long ago too. So I wonder if it's just something they did away with for some reason.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a
But
TV that did too. My first ever flat screen TV. I remember this, which was, back when a 42-inch TV cost $1,500 and you can buy them now for like a quarter, I think. I seen one at Walmart for 25 cents or
yeah,
something.
they just give them out at the door.
I went to McDonald's, I got a Happy Meal the other day, and they gave me a 37-inch TV. I was like, all right.
Yeah, perfect. Beautiful. Jenny says
Yeah,
smart sound in chat. Smart sound. I haven't heard
That
that
sounds
term,
right.
but that makes sense. I mean, that's what I would
Yeah.
want to brand it as, smart sound.
Yeah.
I'm curious if I'll have to Google it now. I mean, I'm not going to buy a new TV, but
yeah, the last thing I was going to say with subtitles is one thing that I think is really great and like for everyone is just they've gotten so much better over the last few years. And I'm sure it's probably some AI stuff or whatever, but they've gotten really good. Like I think that's a good thing for everybody, right? Particularly for if you are hearing impaired, right? That you're not getting those wrong, because you used to get a lot of like wrong words in the middle of stuff, and that doesn't seem to happen as much anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, cool. Welcome everybody to. Oh, sorry, go man.
Okay, no, it's fine. I don't have to keep talking about it. It's fine.
To our intro here, audio clip cuts. Welcome everybody to another episode of the Hackle Box. We got the whole gang together. It's been a while, I feel like, guys.
Yeah.
I was traveling last month.
Reintroduce ourselves. Like, done that in a while.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm Oscar. We've got Pink Fan and Eric here. But yeah, thanks to everybody for joining in. Feels good to have the gang back together. I think I was traveling last month. The month before, we're going to try to do it from DEF CON. Had some technical difficulties, had to punt that. And so here we are 3 months later. Feels good.
Yeah.
And fall's here. So we're in October. I don't know about you guys, but I love fall. Just want to ask, like, what's your favorite things about fall?
We're going to segue into a segue. I love this. All right. I like the weather, man. I was just talking about this on a call earlier this week. I like the temp. Well, and again, it depends on where you're at and whatnot, but I generally feel like fall is great almost everywhere. Where the weather's going to be a little bit cooler, but not too cold. You know what I mean? Like relative to where you are. It's just that it gets a little bit more crisp. It gets a little bit more kind of fresh. Feels like a good thing for me. I could still wear shorts outside, even though soon I probably shouldn't. Things like that.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of flannel, man. I'm rocking my flannel today. Flannel and hoodie season. Like when I'm able to start popping my flannel shirts on again, my hoodies on again, just feels good. I love all the food in fall too. Like, like in the summer, I don't like eating hot bowls of chili or pot pie or like all those things. But like as it starts to chill a little bit, it's like it's chili season, baby. I'm ready to start making chili.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think I've mentioned this talking to you guys. I have mixed feelings about fall. Like, I do enjoy those aspects; those are nice. I like being able to switch over to like long sleeve shirts, mostly so the mosquitoes don't eat me alive because they stay active here until about January, it seems like. And they're really aggressive this time of year too because they never know when the cold is coming. But also like I want to enjoy it, but I know that winter's right around the corner, and I really dislike winter. Like I'm not a fan at all. And so yeah, the food and spooky season. I enjoy spooky season, so it's probably up there on my list.
Yeah.
Nobody mentioned it's pumpkin season now, guys. Pumpkin spice lattes.
So I was gonna say Kelly said sleep with the windows open. I love that too.
Yeah,
because I hate that during the summer is the only time of year where I can't do that. I always want to sleep with the windows open. And then I was going to ask what your least favorite thing about fall was, because for me it's pumpkin spice everything. Like get it out of here. I don't like it. I don't want to smell it. I don't want to hear about it. No. But there.
So last year, I don't know if they're doing it again this year, but dude wipes, which is like, you guys familiar with what dude wipes are?
Yeah,
it's like moist towelettes, like cleaning towelettes or whatever. Last year, as part of pumpkin spice latte season, they released a pumpkin spice latte dude wipe, which I thought was hilarious, and I'm very anxious to see if they do it again. I didn't buy a pack, but if I see them like at Walmart or something, I'm going to pick up a pack of those.
I just think that goes with Josh's comment in the chat that we've taken the pumpkin spice thing way too far.
Way too far.
There was the line, and we're somewhere over here. Yeah,
we jumped the shark. It's getting out of hand. All right, cool. Well, with fall season and all the things we love about fall, I think it's important too. I just want to touch on all the devastating weather events that we've had over the last couple of weeks. because inevitably the things we love about Flaw also bring some negatives to specific people and locations. And so just kind of wanted to chat about that, raise a little awareness. I know, we had Helene come through a couple weeks ago. The death toll for Helene, I was looking this morning, it's up over 200. How many people are still missing from Helene is kind of unknown. I heard reports of, 600 were still missing. This morning, I seen an independent researcher who's kind of like working. He was impacted by the Hawaiian fires, so he has a strong motivation to try to help people find those loved ones that are lost. And his report right now, he said he's at over 1,400 people that have still reported missing from the region. So it's absolutely devastating. And then we had Milton follow up and, Rock, Florida again, after they just went through this. I know that Milton's death toll is already at 16 and climbing. So we've had just significant impact to folks in this region, and just wanted to, I don't know, open up the dialogue. I want to make sure that we're all aware. And really for me, like the big thing I keep thinking about here is we talk a lot on this show about, incident preparedness, incident response, disaster recovery plans, all those things. But this is a real world example of saying why is why it is important to personally, for your home, for your family, for your loved ones, have those same plans at home, so you are able to quickly and appropriately respond to these situations.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think the thing too that is good to remember is yeah, it's good to have the like food and generators and that kind of thing. Like that's absolutely necessary, right? But I think some of the things that people forget about maybe are um, things like meetup locations, right? If you get separated from your family or whatever, ways to communicate when everything's down, kind of because we know that's part of the issue with kind of the North Carolina area. Knowing those mountains, right? You're trapped up there and no way to communicate. And so how do you let people know that you're okay, or that you need help or whatever the case may be. So I think things like that are really important for people to kind of think about, just sort of even beyond the first line stuff that we often think about with like food,
Mhm.
electricity, water.
Yeah, I agree with that, man. Like an out of band communication system is extremely important to have. And it's kind of one of those things where, like, I've been talking to my wife about this a lot lately. And it's like, I'm not going to be a crazy prepper. But also, like, there is a level of preparedness I want to make sure I have just for my own security, to make sure that if I'm in a situation like that, we can survive. But then also, like you mentioned, like we have some sort of communication device. And so I have like a Garmin InReach. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with what those are, but they're a neat GPS tracking system, but it also allows me the opportunity to text through GPS. I know a lot of newer phones, like the recent Apple iPhone, has GPS text capabilities and emergency text capabilities. Some of the Android systems are rolling that out. I will say though, just from reports I've heard of folks like in that North Carolina area, they were trying to utilize Android services and Apple services. They were saying they weren't working in that situation. They still weren't able to communicate. I don't understand why, if that's more of like an oversaturation where there were probably so many people in that region trying to utilize those services that they became inoperable. And I don't even know like if my Garmin would work in that situation. So I think that's something we're probably, as a society, going to learn a whole lot more about in the coming months, because I think it is important. If we're advertising a device has that out of band communication functionality and that doesn't work, we have to fix that, or also make sure people understand it only works in these specific situations. And so in a major disaster recovery situation, you may have to rely on another form of communication.
There's actually some other neat devices like that too. Like we've got a set of these. There's one, it's called GoTenna. And so it allows SMS across like the ham radio bands. And so if there
Mhm.
are, ham radio repeaters or like GoTenna repeaters around or wherever, you can use that. You still, at least the ones that we have, you still need to attach them to your phone through like Bluetooth. And they make me
Mhm.
really nervous because they just seem kind of shady. But in an emergency, I'm not going to be as concerned about that, I don't think. But yeah, they're kind of neat. They're kind of flaky, kind of hard to keep connected, things like that. But I mean, they may be better. I bought those years ago. But yeah, some neat stuff like
So
that out there.
to understand that, think like, so the GoTana situation, so you're essentially routing your SMS through ham, and then the recipients would also have to be on ham as well, right? So if you had a network of ham with like loved ones or family members, you could communicate with them, right?
Yeah, they need the like GoTenna devices as well, as far as I understand it. Like,
Mhm.
I don't think it actually, like it doesn't translate into audible ham radio type stuff. It's just using that network.
Mhm.
But it sends it, just across those bands essentially. But yeah, it's text messages, you would need the recipient to have that as well. And so, like when we got them, the idea was to give one to like my parents, and that way, if we ever needed to communicate back and forth, we've got a pretty good geographical distance. It's a little weird how it works too, because there kind of needs to be some kind of repeater in between you and there. And so, what some folks have done with those is they'll go out like in the woods and hook one up to a battery or something and hang it on a tree. Just and so they have a map, you can look and see where the repeaters are, so you can see if you actually could get a message across and things like that. But yeah, definitely wouldn't be my first line thing, but it's an alternative.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I just wanted to share that with everybody too, and just think about that. Like, make sure you have your plans for your home, your family, making sure you know how to communicate if something happens with your loved ones, know you are safe, and being prepared. Like, so shout out to Ryan Hall. Ryan Hall, y'all, is a YouTube channel. I know Pinky and I watch a lot. He's really proactive and trying to help people be aware and be prepared of storms that are impending and how to make those plans. His saying goes along with what we say here a lot, and it's don't be scared, be prepared. Really like that. But if you're looking to do something, he's got a really good nonprofit. I would encourage you checking it out. The money goes directly to impacted individuals. And, you know, for me personally too, I think I've been trying to figure out like how I can help that area more recover. It's going to be a long-term recovery effort. We're saying probably years to get back to that state of affairs and where it was before. Another thing I've thought about too is, you know, from all the reports I'm getting, most of the people that have been accounted for right now that are safe, they have supplies, they have food, they have water, they have the toiletries, they have everything they need to survive. But then now we're looking at like that secondary layer of impact to that region, which is the economic impact. And we know Western North Carolina, Eastern Tennessee specifically relies heavily upon a lot of tourist traffic for their economies to survive. That's not there now. I've heard reports of businesses who saying like, yeah, we're open again. We've made like $20 in the last week. And so at this rate, we're not going to be open in another month or two. And so something I've been thinking about, like, hey, if you're in the area, maybe just go there, go eat at a restaurant that's open, go hit a local store, give them some business. And I think that's going to mean a lot to those areas right now. And we want that area to try to survive because we think about the human impact as we start to lose that economy as well. It's going to continue to grow. All right, on to the security stuff here. The Internet Archive was hacked. Eric shared that with us, 31 million user records. So the Wayback Machine, I'm sure you guys are familiar with that. Had a data breach that included compromise and exfiltration of the user authentication database, which contained 31 million records. Holy smokes, that's a lot of records.
Yeah, I was surprised a little bit. Damn, you're echoing randomly. I was surprised a little bit by that number. I didn't even, I was talking about it, and I was like, I've never created an account on Internet Archive. I didn't necessarily realize you could. I guess it makes sense that you could, but I just hadn't had one, right? But they do a lot of other things, I guess, and yeah, 31 million users is a lot in that situation. But also, I know in looking and hearing about this, and following Twitter and following some groups and certain types of people, other pen testers, hackers, things like that, a lot of people are not happy about that either. It's like, why are you going to attack something that it's such a great service to the world, basically, right? Like, what are you doing, type of thing. There's a lot of people that are pretty upset by it. It's interesting. A lot of people wanting to hack the hackers type of thing out there, so rallying up.
Yeah, and so like on top of that, so I guess they're being targeted with DDoS attacks right now by a group that is known as a hacktivist group, Black Meta. And I don't understand, just like you said, what is the initiative here, or the intentions or motivation for Black Meta to target the Wayback Machine?
Yeah, well, as Josh was put in chat too, the DDoS attacks and stuff have been, claimed, and the reason is because it's owned by the US, which is an interesting concept. Because it's like, are we talking about the US government? No, it's not, right? You're just talking about the fact that the people who run it have an office in America, and they're in the US. Okay, sure. That's a weird reason to target it, you know what I mean? Which I think is another thing too. It's like, a lot of people are questioning, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? And why are you targeting this? If you want to target something, DDoS many other things maybe that are more associated with the US government or something like that, if you're upset about something. But as far as like Josh said, like they're attacked because they believe that the Internet Archive is owned by the USA. I don't know if that's necessarily the truth in this situation. I mean, like, it seems like there's multiple different attacks. I haven't seen anything necessarily claiming that the hack was from the same group or anything like that. I haven't looked this morning, so I don't know if there's new news like this morning or from last night. I kind of was following it yesterday and the day before, but it seems like they were separate incidents. So the people that are claiming it's because it's a U.S. company are the DDoSers, and the rest of it is kind of unclaimed at this point to some extent. I do know that the database was sent to Have I Been Pwned. There was a cheeky comment, if you will, when they kind of defaced the website saying "See you all on Have I Been Pwned" or on HIBP, and it was sent to him like a week before it was defaced or something like that. And so they were kind of in the know and working on that and just hadn't disclosed it yet. And then I guess the hackers wanted to speed up the disclosure. So
yeah, so there's a JavaScript alert when a visitor hit the web page, popped up, and it said, "Have you ever felt the Internet Archive runs on sticks and is constantly on the verge of suffering a catastrophic security breach? It just happened. See 31 million of you on HIBP."
Yeah. The interesting thing too is I was looking into that, and they said that the compromise, the JavaScript alert on the page came from the breach of a subdomain, but that didn't seem to be related to the overall database breach. So there was like that was another attack. You know what I mean? A secondary attack from assuming the same attacker, right? Because they obviously knew about the compromise. So just an interesting situation. The multiple problems, it sounds like, and then on top of it, getting DDoS the whole time, and yeah. A lot of people unhappy about it, though.
Going back to something you said, when you sent me that a couple nights ago, I was like, wait, you register for an account on the Wayback Machine?
Same.
And so like,
Yeah.
I immediately like opened my vault. I'm like, have I registered for an account there? And I haven't, but I didn't even know that was a thing. Like, so.
Yeah. Well, that's just probably showing our ignorance to some extent too, right? Like I just haven't used it for those things. I'm sure other people, it sounds like a lot of people, do use it. 31 million. But
yeah, it was 31 million unique too, right? So it wasn't even, I mean, there may have been more thing, but yeah, 31 million unique. And it looks like too, just kind of to note, I mean, because we always have to look at some of these things with some suspicion, right? Like, is this legit? And so there was at least one user who allowed his information to be posted and kind of confirmed that, yeah, this does match my password hash plus my last password change date to kind of show that it is valid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that Have I Been Pwned, when receiving the database, Troy, he went through and matched it against some other data that they already had to verify it as well before reaching out and alerting people and stuff too that were on their subscription program and whatnot. So definitely verified at this point.
I always like to have a takeaway for our listeners, and so I guess the big takeaway for me here is everybody's using unique passwords, right? So if you are in that breach, it was unique password. You're not using anywhere else because this one's burned. If you are using that password in other places, I'd probably get on changing that ASAP.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
I mean, at least it wasn't ransomware from what we can tell, right? Or anything like that. Right. Like data's hopefully not lost. I don't know. Site's still down. So
that was my immediate response to your link, because I hadn't clicked on the article yet. I just saw that the Internet Archive had been hacked and was, oh no, I mean, they nuke all the data, or we do we lose all that good stuff? So with you, glad that's not been the case so far.
It was really interesting, right? So they're targeting the Wayback Machine because it's owned by the United States, which is what the report is. But they didn't want to destroy it. They just wanted to harvest all the data, because if they were at the point they could extract the credentials, I mean, and they could, import a custom JS script to do all these things, they likely could have destroyed the database. And I have no idea what their backup situation is like for the Wayback Machine. So that could have been destructive, but they chose not to be destructive. So kind of an interesting approach.
The other side that I could think of it is potentially that they did have some kind of SQL injection or something that let them, exfiltrate that database that they had compromised with an injection. Again, this is all, I have no verification of any of this, but would guess that could have been the case, but those databases could be fully segmented. The databases that feed, I mean, it would have to be the volume of data that's in Wayback Machine, Internet Archive, and stuff like that. Like the volume of data, you wouldn't put that in the same place you'd put your user login. So they might just not have had access to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So CISA put out some warnings this week of critical Fortinet flaw, also some Palo Alto notifications and a Cisco notification. This is kind of a 3-for-1. Lot to unpack here right now. But the first one related to Palo Alto or Fortinet was CVE 2024-23113, which was something published way back in February. And I think we probably talked about this when it came out, because I feel like we talk about Fortinet almost every month at this point. But it was an RCE affecting FortiOS, FortiPAN, FortiProxy, and FortiWeb. They, as I mentioned, Fortinet put out an advisory back in February 2024. Recently, CISA added this to the known exploited vulnerabilities because they are seeing active exploitation in the wild. And another just kind of an interesting note on that one is that the Federal Civilian Executive Branch have mandated to apply the vendor-provided mitigations by October 30th of this year as a requirement at this point. So just want to bring that up again, because I know we talked about it before. I want to make sure that folks, if you have those Fortinet devices, be aware that they are being actively exploited right now. I feel like they're always being actively exploited right now. I hate to just bag on a vendor, but holy shit, man. I want to go back and profile all of our episodes and see how many times we've talked about Fortinet.
Well, yeah,
It's a bunch.
just query news feeds and see how much. I mean, and it's not like the point here with it being a 3-for, right? It's Fortinet, it's Palo Alto, it's Cisco, it's everybody, right? Like it's these types of devices are going to be constantly looked at, constantly under scrutiny, and trying to find some kind of vulnerability. And once it's found, they're going to try to exploit it as long as they, or as much as they can before it gets caught, right? Like it just really drives home the point that these important edge devices and such. I mean, honestly, everything you want to be patching, keeping up to date, right? But I think these are ones that if you go back 5-10 years, everybody was forgetting to patch them. Everybody was not keeping up with them. We've had a massive, just, the torrent of like these exploits, these vulns that are being found in these devices now. So many different exploits that people are able to take advantage of. And hopefully people are getting in the habit of keeping these things up to date, keeping them patching as soon as they hear anything on top of that, and going forward, just staying a lot safer. And a lot of these things that we see from CISA are just like, hey, this thing that was earlier this year, it's being massively exploited now. So if you were on top of it, hopefully you're good. But
yeah, I think there's two quick things. Sorry, Pete. I think about here is, you're right. Like we've seen consistent failures at proper patch management or vulnerability management in general of edge devices. I think we've talked about before, a lot of times, like maybe you're a small business, you worked with a vendor to deploy that box and you're scared to death of applying that update because you don't know what it's going to break. Because historically, when you're updating those devices, it is kind of risky. You can't cause impact, things you're not aware of. And then the secondary problem where I consistently see here is a lot of these edge devices aren't even managed by the business themselves. They're managed by a service provider. And so the service provider may be a little behind. They're not prioritizing those updates. And maybe you don't even have purview on it because you're assuming the service provider is properly managing those devices. So two things there. One, if you don't feel comfortable with that device and managing that device, maybe find a way to educate yourself and get comfortable, or contract a third party to help you with that. And two, hold your service providers accountable for making sure they're properly managing those things.
Yeah. I mean, we run into that all the time on the IR side, right? And it's understandable. If you don't have the expertise to manage these devices, it's really easy to set them up incorrectly and things like that. Totally understand it. But yeah, the other thing that kind of struck me on this one a little bit too, goes along with stuff both of you guys were saying there. But we've seen pretty consistent Fortinet problems over the last couple of years. Again, not to bash on them, it is what it is. And so I know, at least for us, we've seen a pretty big rise in folks using Palo Alto devices. And up until very recently, they did not have sort of the same string of vulnerabilities and things like that come out. Now we're 2 or 3 over the last few months here. And it just shows, I mean, like it's kind of part of that cat and mouse game, right? I mean, you move to a different firewall vendor because the other one's having problems, and then attackers see, hey, there's more people using this now. Let's start taking a look at that one. And it's kind of always going to be the case. But to kind of not bash on one in particular, just to note that these really popular devices, they're always going to be targeted, like Eric was saying there.
Yeah, so the other two we mentioned is Palo Alto devices. This affects appliances before version 1.2.96, so 1.2.96 or later. You don't have to worry about that. And the Cisco one we talked about is Cisco Nexus fabric controllers. But the one thing I did find interesting with the Palo Alto vulnerability is that essentially an attacker could read database contents as part of the attack chain for this vulnerability. But the thing that stuck out is so they could extract usernames, device configs, API keys, but clear text passwords. So it was discovered that Palo Alto is storing user database in clear text, which is a concern. And I'm a bit surprised by that, honestly.
Yeah, I mean,
definitely.
I've seen look, this is, yes, it's a surprise, and at the same time, it's not. Vulnerabilities that have come out over the last 5 years for firewalls and other types of edge devices, we find oftentimes with different file include type of exploits or things like that, memory leakage exploits that we are able to leak or read configuration files that have clear text passwords or at least reversible, passwords. It I'm not sure why you'd think it would start getting better. You know what I mean? But it's also not surprising right now to me either. It's kind of like, one of those things that is just the case. Hopefully it's getting better. Hopefully it does get fixed. One of the things that the Palo Alto one is, it's just expedition, which I wasn't familiar with. It's a method of being able to port from one vendor to another, like to Palo Alto, right? And one of the notes in the article that we have that we were looking at about this, it does call out that they saw, was it 23 servers exposed to the internet. So at least it's small, right?
Okay.
I mean, a lot of times in these cases we see this stuff and it's like, yes, there's a vulnerability in Palo Alto, blah 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 blah. There's 300,000 open on, according to Shodan, as of last week or something, right? There's 23 is what they're saying right now. So at least this one hopefully isn't affecting a lot of people. And it is specific to the Expedition product, at least in this particular case. But again, it's one of those signs that like people are trying to get at these constantly, keep them up to date, think about them. And if you're not able to, or you're not familiar with it, remedy that in some way.
No, that's good context. I think when I looked at this, I assumed that I thought referenced somewhere that all the Pan OS firewalls were affected. So this is only Pan OS firewalls utilizing Expedition. So Expedition is a migration service.
This says the vulnerabilities which affect all versions of Expedition prior to 1.2.96, and then it does later on in the thing say there are approximately 23 Expedition servers exposed to the internet. A lot of them located in out of the country, located in Belgium, Germany, Netherlands, Australia. But I don't know. There might be more to it that this article doesn't go. I didn't go digging around too much. You know what I mean? But
yeah. Good catch, Eric. I definitely missed that too. I read it the same way Oscar did. It was all Pan OS devices and thought, oh yeah, that's not good. But yeah, see.
I do want to call out, like talking about the Cisco one, and this is the Cisco Nexus fabric controller, which again, hopefully there's not a lot of those exposed externally. They are used to manage your fabric. I would think those are protected internally, but I got to give Cisco a little bit of kudos here. A little bit, a tiny bit. One thing that's always pissed me off about Cisco in the past is that if you want updates to your software, you got to have a TAC license, regardless of how vulnerable this device is. And I always felt this was more of a sales tactic. So they force you into system upgrades, continue that TAC license and so on. And if you guys have ever had to deal with TAC licensing issues, it's a huge pain in the ass. But Cisco did say for all folks who own Cisco Nexus fabric controllers, if you're affected by this and you're out of TAC license, you don't have an updated TAC license, you're still going to be able to get the patch. So, all right, way to go, Cisco. Happy to see that. But how about we just open that up for everyone? You sold them the device. Shouldn't they have rights while they are owning and operating this device to be able to make that device secure?
Yeah. I mean, no, it's always been a frustrating thing. And I used to work for a Cisco reseller, and yeah, there's a lot of, hey, we got to renew our TAC this year, and that was a big part of that sales process. But yeah, it's always been frustrating because it's like, we bought this device, 2 years ago from you or whatever. You're not patching it now, kind of thing. So, nope, got to give us more money. So yeah, hopefully this is a move for them in the right direction. Maybe they'll start doing more of this. I don't have a ton of faith in that, but I hope so.
We're going to be optimistic.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like forced degradation of appliances with extra steps. Like it still
Yeah,
works just fine, but
yeah, yeah. That's yeah. I don't know. I mean, they I, now I feel like we're gonna rant about Cisco for the next half an hour here, but it's just like those devices are so expensive already. And, we always joke that the $20,000 of the cost that you're paying for that Cisco device is that sticker on the front of the box. The little hologram sticker that says a Cisco device or whatever. But it kind of is like I mean, that's kind of the thing. And then you got to buy a license on top of that to keep it secure, and it's wrong. Damn it, it's wrong.
dude, I think a lot of the stuff we were just talking about, why people are uncomfortable upgrading their edge devices, is all kind of left over from these network engineers who worked with Cisco during the early days, which was predominantly everywhere. I think if you go back 15 to 20 years ago, and like we've all been heartburned, we've all been burned by that through situations. And like I remember the days when you're upgrading an OS and there's no memory checks to see if you have sufficient memory to be able to support this OS upgrade. You apply, it turns out you don't, you just brick your device and the entire network is down. I also remember like just major syntax changes within a device OS that completely broke your configuration, and no prior documentation or training on what those syntax changes were going to be. So again, you're stuck in the situation where nothing works. The syntax is completely different and you have to learn how to rebuild this configuration on your own on the fly there. And so there's like a lot of huge misses by them during this time period that I think like made people a little bit, shy to go through this upgrade process with other edge devices.
I mean, I'll be honest, I'm getting a little itchy talking about it because it's just, I remember those days and how bad that was.
Yeah.
So thanks for the nightmares of that, Oscar. I mean, I know I said I like spooky season, but come on,
Yeah.
man.
It's October. We're telling horror stories, scary
Mhm.
stories. All right.
The spooky story of bricking your edge firewall. Love that. All right, cool. Moving on. 0-day alert. 3 critical Ivanti CISA vulnerabilities are being actively exploited. It's specifically the Ivanti Cloud Services appliance. Have you guys ever worked with Ivanti appliances at all? Anyone listening today? Are you guys using Ivanti?
I know it's out there. I mean, I've definitely seen it a lot.
Yeah. Anyway, cloud services management applications, so you can manage your enterprise assets, systems, servers, applications, all the good stuff. The vulnerabilities are in the web admin console. So again, kind of what we talked about before, like if you don't have to make that web admin console public, you probably shouldn't make that public. Protect it by a VPN or use application allow listing to permit only required IPs to access that. But this one was kind of interesting to me because this has popped up as an 0-day alert, and then these are being actively exploited. But the catch with all 3 vulnerabilities, one's a SQL injection, one is OS command injection, and the other is a path traversal. They all require authentication. And so it's like, wait, what? They're being actively exploited, but they require authentication. So how did the attackers gain access to be able to exploit these vulnerabilities? Well, it turns out there was last month also a couple of other O-days that popped up for Ivanti that didn't require authentication. And these allowed an unauthenticated attacker to access restricted functionality, bypass admin authentication, and essentially create user accounts, right? So they create user accounts. Now they've discovered 3 other vulnerabilities, and while utilizing those three vulnerabilities, those user accounts, they can exploit these 3 vulnerabilities. I think this is important. It's what we talk about a lot here, where maybe you had Ivanti systems in place last month. You patched for those 2 vulnerabilities, but you didn't threat hunt to determine if you had any indicators of compromise. And now we see those attackers have already gained access to your Ivanti appliance, and they're using that to continue their attack.
Yeah. There's an interesting kind of situation. I think if you kind of look, I mean, this is off the top of my head, right? But realistically, I think once you kind of see some compromises in devices or in certain areas, right, certain applications, whatever they might be, they kind of get more eyes on them, looking for more. Well, if that existed, what about here? What about there? What about whatever? And you kind of see a string of things like this will kind of come around. And it's definitely not the first time I've heard of now there's this other set of vulnerabilities because we had the other ones, right? Or we were able to exploit the other ones and get in and see this other stuff or take advantage of them. Definitely a good idea in general when you hear about things that you know you're using in your environment that are, you know, have found some major exploits, maybe that were getting actively exploited, maybe they weren't yet or something like that, but to kind of continue to stay on top of those ones and make sure that as additional stuff starts to come out around them, you're staying on top of that too. Because I think we do see this a decent amount.
You're exactly right, man. And I mean, it kind of goes back to this, like, I don't know, core thought process for me, where it's like every application, every appliance, everything that exists is inherently vulnerable. Vulnerabilities exist. We just haven't discovered them yet. And when you see this, you get more focus on it. You're exactly right. So researchers hone in, attackers hone in, and they discover other vulnerabilities. Nothing is secure. I mean, to me, the idea that, like, no, that's not a vulnerable appliance or a vulnerable application. Well, it absolutely is. Just because it hasn't been discovered yet doesn't mean it's not vulnerable. Inevitably, it will be discovered.
Yeah. I mean, and I
But
could just say, go ahead, Pink.
no, I was definitely going to derail. So carry on. I'll jump back in a second.
I have definitely in pen testing come across this myself. I mean, I've always said that in penetration testing, I think of it as story building. You're in this world, right? Like this created world by these developers or by these admins or whatever it is, right? If you're talking about internal network and Active Directory and all that stuff, it's like these sysadmins are working from their own perspective, their situations, their struggles, the things they have to deal with, right? And as they are working in that environment, they will do certain things, and that can be a sign or a tell that they are under certain stressors or they're under certain guidelines during implementation that would lead them to make another mistake or a mistake somewhere. There are multiple times in my career as a pen tester where I have found something because of something else I saw that made me think, I bet they also did this then, right? And that's to say that when you do find a vulnerability in an operating system, in a piece of software, device, whatever it might be, that does give you more pieces of the puzzle. That does build a story for you if you're that type of person who's looking at it like that. Like, what if they're using this library, or if that library is out of date, I bet these libraries are out of date. Or if they use this to implement this, that means they didn't maybe know about this, or they were under a time crunch, so they had to implement something else, and so I bet they have some shortcomings here. You can do some of that if then storytelling in an environment to find other problems, and especially in like web interfaces and stuff. I've seen that a lot of web applications, whether they be for a device or just because of web application for whatever other purpose. I have found many things like that where I would, even if it's just like, okay, I see in this situation they named the parameters this and this and this, that would suggest to me that they might name other parameters these. I should attack and look to see if I can fuzz those, use those, do something with those. It all kind of comes together as a story, and so it's very natural to find more vulnerabilities once you've found some.
Yeah. Exactly. Go ahead, man.
I was gonna say, yeah, it's funny, that storytelling process, like, kind of, we use that almost in reverse in the incident response world, right? Too, is we'll see, this system got compromised. Let's try to figure out what the story would be as to how they got there, or why that was an issue. And then it also may be that we're kind of looking at it in the way you are of, okay, this device is unpatched and got compromised as a result of a vulnerability. Kind of what else is unpatched? What along this pathway got us to there? And then the last thing I was going to say is that, but if it has the AI and it's unhackable, does your original statement still stand, Oscar, that everything is vulnerable?
Holy shit, Cyber again. Just like Tesla robots and the Tesla like taxi and the Tesla bus stuff that's popping up over. I seen it this morning. Eric, did you see that?
I saw the Tesla cab and like a Reddit thing. Yeah.
They also got some really interesting looking like Android robots that have pretty good speech capabilities as well. So maybe I was wrong, man. I've always, since we started talking about AI, it's like, this isn't Terminator, I don't know, man.
Sure.
I seen those robots this morning. I was like, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is Terminator.
Me and Pink the whole time thought it was Terminator, so it's
yeah. I mean, get on our level, man. Get to the paranoia with us.
Yeah, and then Elon put out a statement. I guess they're going to rebrand Tesla to Skynet. That's a joke.
Weird.
This is all a joke, everyone. So for
It's a
anyone
good name. It's a good
Yeah.
name. I like it. It's good marketing. I think it'll work out well for them. You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so
That,
yeah,
that
before we
was
move on,
that
some
was I was just saying that was why I didn't derail a second ago, because I knew that was gonna we were gonna end up somewhere else. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a super literal part of me that wanted to start arguing that everything had vulnerabilities. I was like, well, but then I was like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that.
and there is no resolve to that conversation either. I mean,
No.
yeah. So before we move on, though, just so everybody knows, if you're running Ivanti out there, you have patched, just look for any new users, any modified accounts on your system as primary indicators of compromise. And if you have any indicators, I would suggest at that point expanding your threat hunt throughout your enterprise, see what else may have been impacted by that attack. Any you guys would add to that?
Just the same sort of PSA we give every time on this is just when these vulnerabilities come out, there's always that land grab mentality from attackers, right? They're going to come in, establish access, wait for later, or whatever the case may be. So anytime that you have these big vulnerabilities, threat hunt the vulnerabilities, right? Let's patch, but also make sure you weren't compromised before you patched.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, if you go back to these widespread, like talk about the exchange attacks a couple of years ago, we saw a lot of victims were initially compromised, but there was no secondary attack or damaging attack for sometimes 6 months to 12 months later after that initial point of compromise. And so just because you haven't seen any impact from that and you're running those devices doesn't mean you have not been impacted. So make sure you are reviewing those for indicators and remediating properly. I guess you have to think about too. I mean, it's common logic for us, but just to spell it out for everybody too listening, it's like, if you're an attacker, you spray and pray and you get access to 1,000 devices, right? You're not going to be able to execute a full-on ransom attack on all 1,000 of those devices at once. What are you going to do? You're going to see who your victims are. You're going to see who has the most money, the most bankroll, who can you damage the most and put them in a position where they would be more likely to pay you than others. And they're going to prioritize those as their primary victims, but they will either work through that entire list over time or sell your access to someone else.
Yep. Prioritize based off of impact, financial gain, and then also ease of the attack, right? Like depending on the situation. Let's give an example of some edge device that someone's able to compromise, get a foothold on. They come back to it, a couple weeks later, a month later, something like that, to start doing inventory on them all, and they see that this one has a lot more devices available to it than another one does. Like on the inside, they're going to be looking at that kind of stuff too. So
yeah, for sure. Cool. So one more topic I want to hit on this week, guys, or this month. North Korean attackers have been using fake interviews to infect developers with cross-platform malware. So essentially, there's an attack campaign going on where threat actors are looking for job seekers online. They're setting up an interview and setting them up with some tasks and essentially trying to deploy malware to these job seeker systems. The malware at this point looks like it does work on either Apple or Windows systems. So thought this was interesting. I know there was another article a couple of weeks ago kind of talking about how there was a big North Korean initiative as well to infiltrate domestic Fortune companies by posing as non-North Korean remote employees to try to gain employment with these Western companies. And then we see this report a couple of weeks later where they're essentially targeting web developers and trying to deploy malware on their system. So I don't know. I thought it was interesting. I'm not surprised by this at all. I mean, I feel like there's been kind of fake there's been campaigns against job seekers by fake employees for a really long time. But thought it was interesting popping up again this week.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, they might have been around for a long time. I haven't heard about them too much. When I was thinking about this and reading about this is first of all, I just want to say, don't attack the Internet Archive. Don't attack people looking for work. They're having a hard enough time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's messed up. I interview people all the time and I feel bad for these people. They're not going to get the job for some reason because you can only hire one person. Just tons of people have a tough time finding work. I'm going to need to pick on them. But that all said, I mean, it is an interesting game, right? Is it like
Mhm.
we just got done talking about how you compromise 1,000, you're going to come back, you're looking for the easiest one, you're doing all these, you know, and the biggest payoff and stuff like that. This is a little bit different of a tactic. This is a tactic where we're going to compromise people who are looking for work, lay in wait to an extent, right? Like, and try to take advantage of what, when they do get employed, getting into certain things, having something laying there. I mean,
The angle I thought about is actually a little different. And I think it does, to me, correlate to the other initiative to infiltrate the companies by getting hired as non-Korean nationals. Is I think a lot of job seekers are probably employed right now. And so this could be another tactic to gain access into domestic businesses, because I also think a lot of job seekers are employed right now. They're probably applying for those jobs with their work own system. They're probably doing these interviews with their work own system. They're giving them, like, so kind of the payload here is they're saying, hey, we got a development task I need you to complete to try to prove your development skills. And they probably got their tooling set up to be able to complete that on their work on system. So I see this as kind of a pivot to say, hey, let's focus on these people. Let's throw out this wide net, see who we can get. And maybe we get some whales in here that are working for some of our other companies we're already targeting.
I mean, it's both, right? Like, realistically,
Yeah.
it covers both situations. You're currently employed looking for a job, and now they have an access into that, or you're looking for a job, you get hired in the next couple of months, and someone's been laying in there. I mean, one of the things it was talking about, the kind of down the chain of the malware, right, is a kind of invisible a backdoor, right, for them to sit there and just kind of live, hang out. And so key log and things like that. So it is smart, you know. I mean,
Yep.
it's evil, but it's smart.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things it's difficult to know the implications of. And
Yeah.
stop picking on them, man.
Yeah, I'm
Stop
with you,
picking up.
man. Stop picking on.
But yeah, that was one of my notes. Was like I think maybe my only note on this one was this is a pretty slick attack. Like, I mean, this is a smart attack move. I mean, I don't like it, but that doesn't mean it's not smart. But yeah, and developers too, like, tend to be a little overprivileged a lot of times in environments, or at least have an elevated level of privilege, even if they need it. You know, not necessarily overprivileging, right? They're often local admins, things like that. And so probably pretty effective here. Um, I know the other article you kind of mentioned there, Oscar, just sort of the other side of this, more like almost fake job applicants, right? People getting hired and then that work goes elsewhere. I know we have seen that recently, and that's become a pretty interesting tactic, right? Luckily, where we saw it, it got caught quickly and handled. But yeah, you're kind of doing the interview for somebody, and then it's sort of that access broker type mentality, right? You're almost kind of selling off your access to somebody else to form an attack. So yeah.
Yeah. And let me like clarify too. When I said this has been going on before, like what I've seen before isn't exactly deploying malware, but there were campaigns, essentially where fake companies were targeting job seekers, and they were setting up an interview with them, just a phone interview, and then they're saying, hey, to move to the next step, I need you to go complete this profile, right? So they're sending them a link, and essentially in this link, and I don't know if the link was ever weaponized, but it was more focused to extract your personal information, right? So it was a fake entity, but they were saying you got to put in your social, your home address, your license information, all this information. So it was more of a information stealing campaign than it was like this, which is a little more interactive. I think it's kind of an evolution of that attack is, hey, well, let's gain a foothold through this interactive process. But yeah, I'm with you, Pete, too. And like even that one where, you know, the North Korean initiative to get these North Korean nationals to pose as non-nationals to gain employment. Like I've seen this in a different approach before from like managing international teams, where there were people in certain geographic regions of the world that would essentially make a career out of being an interviewer for individuals, right? Especially non-native English speaking companies where they're trying to, or non-English native speaking countries where they're trying to work for Western companies. And so I've had that happen before when I was at a large corporation where we've, you know, went through a process, you interview someone, and then day one, a different person actually shows up for work that day. And so I think this is kind of a risk and a vulnerability of those international employment models as it is. It's very hard to verify in that space as it is today. And so I'm not surprised that they're having success with either of these campaigns right now.
Yeah. Also, as you were saying, people use their work owned laptop for a lot of things.
Yeah.
that out there. Be aware
Yeah.
that it's happening. Don't try to necessarily stop. I mean, stop what you can, right? Don't try to be like crazy about it, but just be aware that this stuff is constantly happening. I don't know if people realize how much people are using their work hardware, work stuff for all kinds of stuff. As someone who sometimes lives in an internal environment, sometimes finds themselves on people's computers, you're going to keylog, you're going to look at certain things, and seeing the things that people are doing. Sometimes I'm just like, get to work.
Yeah, do your job.
Stop
Eric,
shopping
why
for.
have you streamed 80 hours of YouTube the last weekend?
The ones we see pop up in the IR space too is it's like we'll see a bunch of machines get compromised, and then it's just like, hey, just so you know, you should probably tell that user that a lot of their personal accounts are probably compromised at this point, right? Where they log into their Amazon, their banking from their work machine.
Yeah.
Like we get that question a lot, and the answer is yes, very very possible that those credentials are gone and may not be used in this part of the attack, but they may sell those off to somebody else to cut those people on a personal level later.
Yeah. Oh, the amount of times we found personal login information while doing a penetration test for a company. Obviously, we don't do anything with it, but you see it and you're like, you should be better about your own stuff too. Not just cool. The company has used password managers for all that stuff, but you have a Word doc on your desktop, all your personal stuff for some reason. You know what I mean? Like, knock it off.
Yep.
Knock it off.
Yeah. Knock it
Do
off.
better.
Yeah, be better, do better.
Yeah, I guess for folks out there, and this one is tough too for job seekers because, as part of our hiring process, we send you a VM, right, to look at. And so that's kind of normal if you're in, this process of trying to gain employment right now, to interact and be able to have some sort of task to prove your skill level. I think more so for people, just be careful out there. Make sure you're validating those employers who are reaching out to you, and try to really confirm that they are a legitimate employer and you are communicating with a legitimate employee of that company.
Yeah, I thought about that when I was looking at this, like how much. I mean, what we ask people to do doesn't install necessarily a specific software, right? But the reality of the situation is it still could be malicious, and people will do it. They don't ask questions about it, and yeah, gets dirty. Just stop picking on these people.
Yeah,
stop picking on
them. Stop picking on them. I love it. All right, guys. I think that's it. Anything else you guys want to touch on today? Otherwise, we'll wrap it up.
No, happy Halloween and stuff.
Yeah.
So we won't do this again until after Halloween, right? So
yeah. Happy Halloween, happy fall, happy PSL season. Put your flannel on, eat your chili. You guys stay safe out there. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next month.
All right, everybody.